Are those for the show tonight?
Yes, front row. It's gonna be legendary.
You're the man.
Yeah,
Thanks.
No problem.
The Scalper leaned in close, voice loud enough to cut through the roar of the crowd pouring toward the arena. "Best seats in the house," he said, flashing 2 glossy tickets like they were gold. "Right near the stage. You don't want to miss this one." The man he was talking to barely looked up at first. Hoodie pulled low, dark glasses, hands tucked into his pockets like he was just another fan trying to slip inside unnoticed. Around them, excitement crackled in the air, vendors shouting, boots scraping concrete, the distant thump of a sound check rattling the walls. The Scalper mistook the silence for interest. "This tour," he continued, nodding toward the massive Ozzy Osbourne banner hanging over the entrance. "It's historic. Might be the last time you ever see him live." He tilted the tickets closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Simon, man. He's getting old. You don't want to be the guy who missed it." The words hung there for a second too long. The man in the hoodie finally lifted his head. Not offended, not angry, just curious. Like he was trying to decide whether what he'd just heard was real. Behind them, a group of fans screamed as a tour bus rolled past the barricades. Somewhere inside, guitars wailed briefly, then cut off. The show was minutes away. The Scalper smiled, confident now. He had this figured out. "Another fan, another easy sale, trust me," he said, tapping the tickets. "These are the best seats left. Once they're gone, that's it. And with Ozzy." He shook his head knowingly. "You never know how many chances you get." The man reached out and took the tickets, turning them over slowly. His thumb traced the printed name at the top. His face stayed calm, almost amused. For a split second, it looked like he might laugh. Instead, he looked back at the Scalper. The crowd surged forward, security shouting directions, lights flaring bright against the night sky. Everything felt loud, rushed, electric, except for the space between the 2 men, where time seemed to hesitate. The Scalper waited for an answer. A nod, a wallet, anything. What he didn't realize, what no one around them realized yet, was that the man he was selling, best seats in the house, didn't need a ticket at all. Because the concert wasn't waiting for him. It was waiting on him. Outside the arena, the night had its own pulse, part carnival, part controlled chaos. Floodlights washed the concrete in harsh white, making everything feel larger than life. Lines of fans wrapped around the building, some laughing, some shouting lyrics, others clutching worn vinyl sleeves and homemade signs, hoping for a miracle. The smell of street food and spilled beer hung in the air, mixing with the cold metal scent of barricades. Security guards paced back and forth, radios crackling. Vendors hawked tour shirts and hoodies emblazoned with Ozzy's face, young Ozzy, wild-eyed Ozzy, immortal Ozzy. The massive banner above the entrance showed him frozen mid-scream, arms outstretched, commanding an audience that wasn't even inside yet. And right there, just off to the side, stood the man in the hoodie. No entourage, no spotlight. No velvet rope bending out of the way. He blended in effortlessly, like he'd learned long ago how to disappear in plain sight. The hat pulled low, glasses hiding familiar eyes, posture relaxed. To anyone passing by, he was just another fan who showed up early, taking it all in. People brushed past him without a second glance. A couple argued about where to sit. A father lifted his kid onto his shoulders. Phones were already in the air, recording nothing and everything at once. Nobody noticed the quiet irony standing 10 feet from them. The reason they were all here, unrecognized and unbothered. The Scalpers, on the other hand, noticed everyone. They hovered near the flow of the crowd like fishermen in shallow water, reading faces, listening for hesitation. They knew who was desperate, who was excited, who had waited too long to buy tickets. Their voices overlapped in a constant murmur. 2 seats left. Close to the stage. Price goes up once the doors open. The man in the hoodie had paused near the entrance, not rushing, not checking his phone. Just watching. The crowd, the lights, the energy he'd created and no longer needed to prove. Somewhere inside the arena, the crew was finishing final checks. Amplifiers hummed. Drum kits waited under darkened spotlights. A stage built for one man stood ready, even though that man was still outside, surrounded by strangers who had no idea. A group of fans nearby debated which song would open the show. Someone yelled, "He better play the classics." Another shouted back,
"He has the classics."
The man in the hoodie smiled faintly at that. Tonight wasn't about recognition. Not yet. It was about witnessing how the world moved when it thought he wasn't looking. how people spoke about legends when they believed legends weren't listening. And right here, in the middle of all that noise, was where the story truly began. The scalper circled back like he'd smelled opportunity. He was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, jacket unzipped despite the cold, confidence stitched into every movement. He'd already made a few sales, his pockets were thicker now, and that made him bolder. He spotted the man in the hoodie standing still, watching the crowd instead of checking the time. That pause told him everything he needed to know. "Hey, my man," the scalper said, stepping into his line of sight again. "You still looking?" He didn't wait for an answer. He never did. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the tickets, crisp and deliberate, like a magician about to finish a trick. "These are legit," he said quickly. "Front section. Clear view. You won't get closer unless you're on stage." The man in the hoodie glanced down, then back up, expression unreadable. The scalper took that as a green light. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, leaning in as the crowd surged past them. "I've been doing this all night. Prices are about to jump once they open those doors." He nodded toward the entrance, where security had begun tightening the lines. "After that, forget it." The man still didn't speak, so the scalper pushed harder. "Look, I don't know how long you've been a fan," he said, gesturing toward the Tower Ozzy banner above them, "but this isn't just any show. This is history." He tapped the ticket with his finger. "Ozzy Osbourne, the man's a legend. But legends don't go forever." There it was. The first crack. "He's been at this for decades," the scalper continued, voice dropping into something almost respectful. "And yeah, he's getting old." The words landed heavier than he expected, but he didn't stop. "Doesn't mean he's not great," he added quickly. "Means moments like this. They don't come back." The man in the hoodie shifted his weight slightly, the smallest movement, but the scalper noticed. Encouraged, he went on. "People wait their whole lives to see him up close, to say they were there. You don't want to tell your kids someday you missed it because you hesitated." He smiled, practiced and persuasive. "I've got guys behind me who'll take these in a heartbeat." He glanced over his shoulder theatrically, as if confirming the threat. "Best seats in the house," he repeated. "Right near the front. You'll feel the music in your chest." Inside the arena, a low rumble rolled through the walls, a bass note from a final sound check. The timing couldn't have been better. The ground seemed to vibrate under their feet. The scalper seized the moment. "Simon. This might be the last time. With Ozzy, you never know." He said the name casually, familiarly, like he was talking about a distant star who existed only on posters and playlists. Not the man standing in front of him. The hoodie's shadowed face didn't change. No anger, no correction. Just a calm, patient stillness that felt oddly out of place in all the noise. The scalper held the tickets out between them, waiting for the grab. Waiting for the money. What he didn't realize was that every word he'd just spoken, every assumption, every careless comment, was quietly stacking itself up. And when it finally came time to respond, the weight of it all was going to fall at once. For a moment, nothing happened. The scalper stood there with the tickets extended, arms slightly tense now, smile beginning to stiffen at the edges. He'd delivered his pitch perfectly. Urgency, emotion, scarcity. Normally, this was the part where the deal closed. A nod. A reach for a wallet. A quick handshake before melting back into the crowd. But the man in the hoodie didn't move. The noise around them kept going, loud and restless. A chant broke out somewhere near the barricades. Laughter spilled from a group passing behind them. Security radios crackled with clipped instructions. Life flowed forward, impatient and unaware. Between the two men, time slowed. The man lowered his gaze to the tickets again. He didn't rush. He didn't skim. He studied them as if they were something unfamiliar, something worth understanding. His fingers held the edges carefully, almost gently. The scalper cleared his throat. "They're real," he said, a little sharper now. "You can check the section numbers." Still nothing. The man turned the tickets over. Front, back, the glossy surface caught the arena lights, throwing brief flashes across his glasses. He read the printed details, date, venue, seat numbers, things he'd seen 1,000 times before, but never quite like this. Behind them, the doors opened. A surge of movement rippled through the crowd as the first wave of fans was allowed inside. Cheers erupted. People started pushing forward, anxious, electric. The show was officially happening now. The scalper felt the pressure shift. "Look," he said, lowering his voice again, trying to regain control. "I don't have all night." The man in the hoodie glanced toward the entrance, then back to the tickets. For a split second, his eyes softened. Not with nostalgia, more like recognition, like he was seeing the end of a long road stretching behind him. The scalper mistook the look.
See?
He said quickly.
You feel it too.
That's why you're here, silence answered him. The man finally lifted his head. Their eyes met. It wasn't a stare. It wasn't confrontational. It was calm, steady. The kind of look that made people slow down without knowing why. The scalper felt it, though he couldn't explain it. His rehearsed confidence faltered, just a fraction. Around them, people were filing through the doors now, disappearing into the glow of the concourse. The crowd thinned, but the energy thickened, buzzing like a held breath. The man shifted his weight and exhaled quietly. He seemed amused, not in a mocking way, in a gentle, almost affectionate way, as if the situation itself had surprised him. He held the tickets up between them, level with his chest. The scalper waited. This was it, he thought. Payment or rejection. Either way, it would be over. Instead, the man stayed silent a moment longer, long enough for the bass inside the arena to roll again, deeper this time. Long enough for a chant of
Z.
Ozzy to rise faintly through the walls. Long enough for the irony of the moment to settle into the space between them. The man's lips parted slightly, as if he was about to speak, then closed again. The scalper swallowed. What do you say? He asked, trying to sound casual, though his voice betrayed a hint of strain. The man didn't answer yet. He lowered the tickets slowly, eyes never leaving the scalper's face. And in that quiet pause, while thousands of people rushed inside to see a legend take the stage, everything balanced on a single sentence that hadn't been spoken. Not yet. The man finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost conversational, as if he were asking for directions instead of standing at the edge of a moment that was about to snap in half. Can I ask you something? He said. The scalper blinked, caught off guard by how ordinary it sounded. He nodded. Sure. The man lifted one of the tickets again, tapping the printed name at the top with a finger that didn't shake. These seats, he said gently. You said they're the best in the house. The scalper straightened, relief creeping back in. This was familiar ground again. Questions meant interest. Front section, he said quickly. Closest view you're gonna get. Worth every dollar. The man nodded slowly, like he was confirming something to himself. And you said I shouldn't miss this, he continued. Because he's getting old. The scalper laughed lightly, trying to keep it friendly. Hey, I mean no disrespect. Just saying legends don't tour forever. Another nod. The man lowered the ticket and looked up, meeting the scalper's eyes fully now. For the first time, there was no shadow from the brim of his hat. No evasiveness. Just a quiet certainty that felt heavier than anger ever could.
I get that,
he said. I really do. The scalper waited for the counteroffer. The negotiation, the money. Instead, the man asked one more question. Tell me something, he said. If you had the chance to walk right past the crowd, walk straight backstage, and step on that stage without showing a ticket, he gestured vaguely toward the arena doors. Where would you sit? The scalper frowned. What? The man smiled faintly. Not smug, not cruel. Just honest. I'm asking, he said, because I don't usually sit in the audience. The words landed softly, too softly. They didn't explode right away. They didn't announce themselves. They just existed between them, quiet and strange. The scalper let out a short, uncertain laugh. Yeah, okay. The man reached up and slowly removed his glasses, then his hat. Time didn't stop, but it staggered. The scalper's smile froze mid-breath. His eyes flicked over the man's face once, then again, like his brain was scrambling to catch up with what his eyes already knew. The lines, the expression, the unmistakable presence he'd been selling stories about for the last 10 minutes. No, he whispered. The man tilted his head slightly. Yes, he said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. I'm Ozzy. The world seemed to inhale. Behind them, someone screamed as they recognized him too. A phone clattered to the ground. The chant inside the arena swelled suddenly, as if summoned by the truth finally spoken aloud.
Ozzy, Ozzy.
The scalper staggered back half a step. I didn't. His words tangled. I swear I didn't know. I mean, Ozzy held up a hand. It's all right, he said easily. Happens more than you'd think. The scalper stared at the tickets in his own hand now, as if they'd transformed into something radioactive. I was just doing my job, he stammered. I didn't mean. I know, Ozzy said. He glanced around at the crowd streaming past them, the lights, the banners with his own face stretched 50 feet tall. Then he looked back at the scalper. "You were trying to sell me the best seat in the house," he said, amused. The scalper nodded numbly. Ozzy leaned in just a little and delivered the line that would echo long after the music started. "I built the house." Silence hit harder than noise ever could. The scalper's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him completely. He looked small now, not because Ozzy loomed, but because reality had finally caught up. Ozzy gently placed the tickets back into the scalper's hand. "Keep 'em," he said. "Someone out there really wants them." Then he turned toward the entrance, toward the stage, toward the roar that had been waiting for him all along. Behind him, the scalper stood frozen, holding tickets to a show he would never forget, sold to a man who never needed them in the first place. The reaction didn't hit all at once. It rippled. First, the scalper. His face drained of color so fast it looked unreal, like someone had pulled the plug on him. His mouth opened, then closed again, hands still clutching the tickets, as if they were the only thing keeping him upright. He tried to speak, but whatever words formed in his head refused to come out in the right order. Around them, a few nearby fans froze mid-step. "Wait, is that?" Phones rose instinctively, screens lighting up the dark like fireflies. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed, sharp and disbelieving. A woman covered her mouth with both hands, eyes wide, whispering his name like a prayer. "Ozzy." The recognition spread fast now. People stopped walking. A small circle formed without anyone consciously deciding to make one. Security guards turned, sensing a shift in the crowd's energy. A murmur rolled outward, building in layers. "No way. That's him. That's actually him." The chant from inside the arena spilled through the open doors, louder now, perfectly timed.
Ozzy! Ozzy!
And the people outside reacted like they'd just been handed the answer to a question they hadn't realized they were asking. The scalper swallowed hard. "I didn't know," he said again, voice barely above a whisper this time. His earlier confidence had vanished completely, replaced by something close to panic. "I swear, I wouldn't have." Ozzy had already started to turn away. But the moment wouldn't let him go that easily. A kid near the barricade tugged on his father's sleeve, pointing. The father's eyes widened, then softened, like he'd just witnessed something he'd be telling for the rest of his life. Somewhere, a fan started crying, not loud, not dramatic, just overwhelmed. Security moved in quickly but not aggressively. They recognized him now too. One guard nodded, respectful, almost grateful, and gently guided the growing crowd back to keep a path clear. Ozzy lifted a hand briefly, not a wave, not a performance. Just an acknowledgement. The effect was immediate. The noise spiked, then settled into a stunned hush. The scalper stepped back, giving space, his shoulders rounded now. He watched Ozzy walk toward the entrance, flanked quietly by security, blending once again into motion, but this time, the motion bent around him. People leaned in just to catch a glimpse, a moment, proof that this had really happened. The doors swallowed Ozzy up. Outside, the crowd buzzed with disbelief. Phones replayed what had just been captured. Voices overlap. Everyone trying to explain it at once. The scalper stood there, still holding the tickets, staring at the spot where Ozzy had been a second earlier. The arena lights flared brighter. Inside, the crowd roared. And outside, in the aftermath of the shock wave, one truth settled in quietly. This wasn't just a concert story anymore. It was the kind of moment people would swear was fake. Until they remembered where they were standing when it happened. The noise slowly moved away, pulled toward the arena like a tide answering the moon. One by one, people disappeared through the doors, still buzzing, still replaying what they'd just seen. The space outside the entrance began to breathe again. The scalper didn't move. He stood there with the tickets hanging loosely in his hand. No longer props, no longer inventory, just thin pieces of paper that felt heavier than they should. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time all night, he looked his age. A security guard glanced at him, then back toward the doors, then shook his head with a half-smile that wasn't unkind. "Rough night," he said quietly before turning away. The scalper exhaled long and shaky. A few people passed by, giving him looks that weren't cruel, just curious. Some smiled, some nodded. One guy clapped him gently on the shoulder as if to say, "Yeah, that just happened." The scalper stared down at the tickets again. He replayed every word he'd said. "He's getting old. Might be your last chance. Best seats in the house." Each line came back sharper now, stripped of bravado, heavy with unintended disrespect. He hadn't meant harm. He'd been doing what he always did, talking fast, selling urgency, turning legends into leverage. But standing there alone, he felt the weight of what he'd reduced a living person to. Not a man, a product. He swallowed hard and ran a hand through his hair. A couple walked past arguing playfully about the opening song. A group of friends laughed, adrenaline still high. Life kept moving, indifferent to his internal reckoning. But something had shifted. Inside the arena, the first roar of the crowd surged as the lights dimmed. The Scalper felt it in his chest, the vibration traveling through the concrete. He imagined Ozzy stepping onto the stage, not as an image on a banner, not as a name on a ticket, but as the same calm man who'd stood in front of him minutes earlier. The man who hadn't raised his voice. The man who hadn't mocked him. The man who could have embarrassed him in front of thousands, and chose not to. That choice landed hardest of all. The Scalper folded the tickets carefully, creasing them down the middle not to sell, just to hold. He didn't shout prices anymore, didn't wave them in the air. He simply stood there, watching the doors, listening to the distant music swell. For the first time that night, he wasn't trying to get something from the moment. He was learning from it. And as the opening notes rang out inside, one thought stayed with him, clear and undeniable. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. Stories like this travel fast because they touch something deeper than surprise. On the surface, it's ironic, almost funny. A Scalper trying to sell concert tickets to the very man headlining the show. It sounds like a setup, the kind of tale people assume is exaggerated or scripted. But what gives it weight isn't the twist. It's what the moment reveals when the twist is stripped away. For a few minutes outside that arena, fame didn't exist. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't a headline or a legend or a larger-than-life figure frozen on banners and t-shirts. He was just a man standing in a crowd, listening to how people talked about him when they believed he wasn't there. That's rare. Most of us never hear the unfiltered version of how we're perceived. He did, and he responded without anger, without ego. That restraint is what makes the moment land. The Scalper didn't get publicly humiliated. He wasn't turned into a villain. Instead, he was quietly shown the difference between image and humanity. And that's something anyone watching can recognize in themselves, because this isn't really a story about Ozzy. It's about how easily we reduce people to labels, legends, icons, old stars, products. We talk about them as if they're finished chapters instead of living pages. We speak casually, forgetting that the people behind the names can still hear us. The Scalper's mistake wasn't ignorance, it was distance. He'd turned a human being into a talking point, a sales angle, a deadline. Something to exploit instead of respect. And Ozzy didn't correct him with anger. He corrected him with presence. That's why this moment resonates. In a world obsessed with clout, the most powerful thing in that exchange was humility. Ozzy didn't demand recognition. He didn't lead with status. He let the truth arrive on its own, and when it did, he used it gently. People feel that. They recognize it as something missing from everyday life, where being right matters more than being kind, where exposure is valued over understanding. This story reminds us that greatness isn't just measured by how many people know your name. It's measured by what you do when they don't. And maybe that's why the moment sticks, not because a Scalper was embarrassed, but because a legend showed what it looks like to remain human, even when the world is ready to turn you into anything else. The crowd poured into the arena, lights flashing, music thundering, but outside the story lingered in a quieter, more powerful way. A Scalper, confident and bold, had tried to sell tickets to the very man whose name was on every banner, every t-shirt, every excited conversation. And the moment he realized who he was talking to, priceless. A mix of shock, awe, and instant humility rippled across him, and anyone watching could feel it too. But the reason this story spreads isn't just the irony. It's the lesson hidden in those few seconds. Ozzy Osbourne didn't shout. He didn't humiliate. He didn't need to. He simply showed the world what real presence, real humility, and real respect look like. The kind of power that doesn't announce itself. The kind that whispers, even in the chaos of thousands. It's a reminder that greatness isn't measured by your fame, or your tickets or your front row seats. It's measured by how you carry yourself when no one is expecting you to matter, and how you treat those who misjudge you along the way. This isn't just a story about Ozzy. It's a story about every legend we pass without noticing, every person we underestimate, every moment where humanity quietly triumphs over ego. So, next time you see someone walking through the crowd, remember you never know who you might be talking to. or what lesson they might leave you with. Who else do you think could pull off a moment like this without saying a word? Tag someone who needs to see this.